Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
We sure can, sir. Thank you so very much. Chief Klimek, I see you're online. Can you hear and see us?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Thank you. Give me just one moment while we wait for Mr. Carpentier. Mr. Mayor, I'm not seeing any messages from him in case he's...
Mr. Carpentier. He was just obviously on our work session call.
Yes, sir.
We'll give it another minute here.
Okay. Triple check all the invites too.
I like that American flag there that we
Pretty cool.
have on our, yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
Mr. Carpentier, I see you've joined us. Can you hear and see me?
I can.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. Mr. Mayor, you
All right.
are all in.
Thanks everyone for joining us. I'll go ahead and call tonight's town board regularly scheduled meeting to order. First item on our agenda is roll call. Ms. Humphries.
Mayor Rengemeyer.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Bennett.
Here.
Mr. Soslowski.
Here.
Mr. Talon.
Present.
Mr. Wilson.
Present.
Mr. Carpentier.
Present.
Thank you.
Mr. Bennett, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all. Item number 3 on our agenda this evening is review of the agenda by the board in addition of any new items of new business to the agenda for consideration by the board. Is there a move to approve the agenda as presented this evening?
So moved, Soslowski.
Second. Barry.
I have a first from Mr. Soslowski and a second from Mr. Carpentier, it sounded like. All in favor of approving the agenda as presented this evening, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? And the agenda is presented unanimously this evening. Item number 4 on our agenda tonight is board liaison reports. Town board member Carpentier, Chamber of Commerce and Clearview Library Board.
Hi, Mayor. I got a couple of things on the last meeting here, but in regards to the Chamber of Commerce first, I think they have a copy of the new logo that they have. I think since Stacy sent that out, I thought it looked pretty good and pretty refreshing. Excuse me. We met at face-to-face this time, which was nice at the Windsor High School early in the morning, so that was nice, and had all the desks and bus socially distanced apart from us and stuff. Just a couple comments. Michelle is on the move. She's working hard, kind of getting everything rearranged now. We've got, they did receive our grant, so they're very thankful for that and wanted me to condole that too. Let's see, she's just been in there taking care of business. They're coming up with a committee to start going after those past due accounts. Those are very important to these people right now, and that's where we're going. They are also in the process of trying to get rent relief for 4 or 5 months right now. They're talking with the landlord right now to see if they can pull that off right now too. And that's about it on the Chamber of Commerce. In regards to the library itself, the library, not much has happened, although since the last report either, Mr. Mayor. They are working very busy with the outsourcing, takeouts, to go, delivery to books. I went over there myself and kind of watched the traffic and the crowd of people who's going and the demographics of the people that are going. They're just laying everything out on the sidewalk there when people call in and request a book in a brown bag, and they come and pick it up and off on their way again. So it's going pretty good. We are having a board meeting coming up on June 25th, and they're going to present the new plan to open up the library again. That concludes my story.
Okay. Town Board Member Wilson, Planning Commission, Larimer County Behavioral Health Policy Council.
Yeah, we meet at the beginning of the month, so no major update, except for if you read the newspaper, you maybe saw that our friends in Fort Collins were objecting to the proposed location at Taft Hill and Trilby Road. And so I'm going to represent Windsor on a 45-day expedition led by Fort Collins to look at alternative sites. And so it's kind of late in the game because the tax is approved and the ship has been moving in one direction for a while, and I'm kind of sensitive. I don't want to push out the project because it's much needed, and I certainly don't want to add cost to the project, but certainly, and some of the concerns maybe were more Fort Collins specific when there are actually 8 different municipalities within Larimer County. So I'll just, that is something that just came about the last few days. There's an article in the Colorado newspaper today, and I'll keep you guys and ladies and gentlemen posted as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mayor Pro Tem Bennett, Water and Sewer Board, Highway 34, County Road 74, and I-25 coalitions.
Yeah, the Water and Sewer Board had their last meeting in May, which was also attended by our newest board member to be, Julie Klein. At that time, they made the recommendation to us regarding the backflow prevention devices, which is on our agenda again tonight for the second reading. The 34 Coalition and I-25 Coalition meet at the same time as the North Front Range Metropolitan Organization, so they will be meeting again on August 6th. It's pretty cool to see the progress being made on I-25. On 34, the big thing right now is the bridge at the intersection of 34 and I-25 being replaced. The 74 Coalition, that's on my to-do list. I had a brief conversation with our former mayor, Christy Melendez, who was on that. 2 of the key people who were kind of organizing that are no longer in that same role. So on my to-do list after next week is to get together with a couple of the people who were on that and get caught up, frankly, on where they are, who the players are, and what the next steps are. That's my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Bennett. Town Board Member Talon, Parks, Rec, and Culture Advisory Board, Great Western Trail Authority.
Yes, good evening, or good morning. I don't know which one it's going to work for. But anyway, I haven't met with the Park, Rec, and Cultural Advisory Board this month, but I did have a detailed tour of the Great Western Trail Authority with Tom Jones. We went out there and spent a couple hours. It was eye-opening. I think that this trail is going to be amazing. And as we develop out, and right now it's all crushed gravel, crushed fines out on the trail. But as it develops out, and if we as a board look at that and eventually put that to concrete as development goes out, that is going to be an amazing trail. It's got everything that you'd ever want to see. You've got all the agriculture and everything. I really was impressed with what they're doing. That's the end of my report. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Town Board Member Talon. Town Board Member Kozlowski, Windsor Housing Authority and the Windsor Severance Fire District.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The Housing Authority, I'm not sure. I think, at least according to their normal calendar, would have had a meeting last week on Tuesday, the 16th. I had sent them my contact information and phone and email asking to be invited on whatever type of meeting they were having. I had not heard anything. So I'm not sure whether in fact they had a meeting or not. If they did, I'm sorry that I wasn't there or wasn't included. I will continue to reach out to them and make sure that I am getting the right invitations. The fire, Windsor Severance Fire District did have a meeting on June 11th. Fairly full agenda. I think, as you might imagine, the fire district in particular is looking at their budgeting for the year, same as the town has, and trying to consider what type of adjustments need to be made. I noticed in their budget for the 2020 budget, for instance, their total revenues for projected to be around 12.7 million. 11.1 of that is property taxes. And of that 11.1, 5.3 is projected to be from oil and gas. So obviously, I think as they head into 2021 and 2022, same as the town, have to take a very hard look at the property tax impacts, not only from oil and gas, but for a potential Gallagher adjustment. They've already made adjustments this year. They've reduced their general fund budget by $450,000 and the CapEx budget by $825,000. Hardly sustainable though. So that is probably the focus of much of their discussion and planning. They are in fact going to be looking at possibly having a de-Gallagher election that would allow them to go to the voters and be approved to make adjustments to mill levies that would offset any decrease in the assessment rates due to Gallagher. That's, I guess, certainly other elements regarding organizational updates, fire marshal's report were covered in the meeting. But I think the critical thing for them, obviously, and for the public to consider is the budgeting and financial impacts of the current economic slowdown. That's my report. Thank you.
Ron?
Yes.
I just want to say, Mr. Sosowski, sorry to hear that you had the issue with the housing authority, and staff will be happy to reach out to them as well and make sure you're notified. So I'm sorry that went on, but we can certainly make sure that they have you on the list if they don't already.
Yeah, I did send, Shane, I did send him my contact info via email to one of the members. Got a response saying, okay, great, thanks for the intro, look forward to meeting you, but I hadn't heard. So I imagine it's just an oversight.
Okay, well, we'll circle back on that because, I'd hate to deprive you of getting to participate in those meetings. So,
yeah.
Sorry about that.
Okay, thanks.
And I have the North Front Range MPO and the Downtown Development Authority. There is no update from the North Front Range MPO since our last meeting, which was before our first board meeting in June.
Development Authority, one of the big developments that happened was last week. There was a joint meeting between the Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Development Authority, and myself and Stacy Miller. This was in Stacy's update that she provided to the board, but basically the Downtown Development Authority, the Chamber, and the town all want to develop a MOU so that we can all be, jointly participating with one another. And know what the expectations are of the different boards and how we can all work together, obviously, to make sure that Windsor's businesses get the attention that they need, and with the chamber get what they're paying for with the investment that they make in their membership in the chamber, as well as, and it's been many, many years since the Downtown Development Authority and the chamber and the town were all so cohesive and on the same page. So it really was a great meeting last week that I got to sit in on and be a part of, as well as Michelle Vance, who's the new director of the Chamber of Commerce, also wanted to show off the new chamber office that she has redecorated, repainted, and really, I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago in my report, that she wants to make, kind of turn it into a regional tourism office as well, considering the sports park starting construction and getting off and being at full speed in the next year to two. So anyhow, that's kind of my update with regards to the Downtown Development Authority and the North Front Range MPO. Item number 5 on our agenda this evening is public invited to be heard. Individuals wishing to participate in the public invited to be heard on a non-agenda item are requested to sign up via the online format that we have at this point. When you are recognized, please begin to speak, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to address the board. Do we have anyone who is...
We do not at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to item B on our agenda this evening, the consent calendar. On the consent calendar, we have 4 different resolutions. Resolution number 2020-45, resolution number 2020-46, resolution number 2020-47, and resolution number 2020-48. Is there a motion by the board to approve the consent calendar as presented this evening?
Hi, this is Barry Wilson, District 2. I move that we approve the consent calendar as presented.
This is Victor Tal, District 5. I second.
So I have a first on the floor from Mr. Wilson, a second from Mr. Talon to approve the consent calendar as presented this evening. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. And the consent calendar is approved as presented this evening. Item C on our agenda this evening is board action. First item is resolution number 2020-49, a resolution pursuant to section 9.1, subsection G of the Windsor Home Rule Charter, appointing Jeffrey P. Anderson of Sweetbaum, Sands and Anderson, PC, to serve as special counsel to the town of Windsor with respect to real property matters associated with the Frank State Wildlife Area. This is legislative action, and staff presentation this evening will be given by Mr. McCarter. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What's before you tonight is rare, but it is something that we need to consider this evening. Wade Willis and I have been working on sorting through the legal history of Frank State Wildlife Area. As I mentioned in the staff memo, that wildlife area goes back to easement deeds that were granted in the mid-60s, 1967. But they were updated in 1995 when a new owner took control of the property. And what we have discovered is that a step that should have been taken in 1995 wasn't. And it has to do with subordinating the interests of another easement holder on one of the parcels. Because we don't know what the effect of that failure is without some specialized knowledge in the area of easements, I cannot give the town board and I can't give Wade a good opinion on where we stand with that situation. Mr. Anderson has offered to do the work for us. His engagement letter is in the materials. I've had good referrals for him and I've had a couple of good conversations with him. So I do think he understands the narrow scope of what we're asking him to do. So I am recommending that this resolution be approved tonight so that we can get him started helping Wade and I sort out these various conservation easements. I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for Mr. McCarter? Yes.
Mr. Sosowski?
Mr. Sosowski.
He says it. Yes, thank you. Hey, Mr. McCarter, just looking at this, I'm curious. I'm guessing this would have been an exception on a title report. Are we asking outside counsel to try to identify the appropriate parties to fix this through some current type of document? Or are the parties not available and we're really asking him to just advise us on what exactly is the risk? Assuming we cannot find a corrected document.
It is the latter, Mr. Sislowski, and the reason for that is the state of Colorado, the Division of Wildlife, has provided us all of its documentation, and the subordination agreement that was required cannot be found. We have also, through the state, had a couple of brief conversations with the party that should have subordinated and didn't. And that party doesn't seem terribly interested in subordinating now. So we're trying to assess what exactly their rights are. We're trying to assess if we're stuck with them, what effect that could have on Wade's plans for this property. And so it really is an analysis of whether we're stuck with it, which I believe we will be, and then what do we do about it? Do we continue with this transaction? Do we accept it with blemishes? And Mr. Anderson should be able to help us sort that out.
Was there some other, the activity of some other party that was contingent upon getting this subordination that would also, in a sense, be negated because we didn't receive it?
The conservation easements themselves were dependent upon this subordination agreement, but the trouble is the statute of limitations for enforcing that promise have long lapsed.
Sure, yeah.
My hope is that Mr. Anderson will find something that we can use to compel people to do what they said they would do, but I'm not confident of that, and so that's one of the reasons we're hiring him.
Got it.
Is to get into this very specialized area of the law.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Carter.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Are there any other questions? Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Wilson?
Yes, I plan to support this. I think it's money well spent. That's over 300 acres of kind of pristine wildlife area right along the Poudre River, and I think we want to protect that corridor as it passes through town. And so, yeah, I plan to support it just for that reason, so we can get to the bottom of this and hopefully get to a point where we can move forward with the plans that have been put together by Eric Lucas and Wade Willis and other people.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
There are hands raised, comments, questions? I don't see any hands.
Seeing none.
Okay. Seeing none, is there a motion by the board to approve resolution number 2020-49?
Mr. Chair, I move, this is Victor Talon, District 5, I move that we approve the resolution number 2020-49.
This is Barry Wilson, District 2. I second that motion.
So I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Talon and a second by Mr. Wilson to approve resolution number 2020-49. All in favor of approving, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Hearing none, the motion to approve resolution number 2020-49 is approved unanimously. Moving on to item C2, consideration of resolution number 2020-50, a resolution approving the collaboration agreement related to distribution of CARES Act funds between the town of Windsor and the Weld County Board of County Commissioners with respect to funding available for reimbursement of unbudgeted expenses related to the COVID-19 health emergency. This is legislative action. Staff presentation will be given this evening by Mr. Hale, our town manager. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Honor. So Congress passed the COVID-19 Relief Fund earlier this year. Among other things, it directs $150 billion in direct aid, specifically for COVID-19 related expenses to states, tribal governments, territories, and local governments over the population of 500,000 people. The bulk of the funding goes directly to the states using a population-based formula. And although no state will receive less than $1.25 billion. So in Colorado, our 5 largest counties received direct distribution. Larimer County, I believe, is the 6th most populated county, but they did come in under that 500,000 population. And so all of our funds are coming through the state. Initially, the state had intoned that it did not intend to share this funding with the municipalities. I believe the town actually sent a letter to Governor Polis earlier this year requesting he reconsider that. And ultimately, the state did determine that it would, out of its $1.67 billion, it would share back $275 million to local governments. And so what that means more locally is that Larimer County will receive about $30.6 million, and Weld County will receive $27.8 million. From a municipal standpoint, the best part of the governor's order in the state is that it does require collaboration between the municipalities and the counties. To showcase that on the Weld County side, Mayor Rennemeyer, Mayor Pro Tem Bennett, and I sat in on 2 or 3 Weld County conversations. Again, between Weld County and the towns, there are, I think, 32 local governments represented, so it wasn't a small stretch, it was a populated group. And then on the Fort Collins side, it was just the city, town managers, and county managers that participated in that group. But for everybody, we basically have had about a month to have these discussions and figure out how to equitably split these monies. The other larger counties that have the direct distribution all split the money basically 55% to the county, 45% to the municipalities, and then in almost every instance, the counties in their unincorporated county also received a pro rata share. So there was another memo that I attached. The graduate assistant in Fort Collins kind of showed more county details, so I won't get into that. But as you look at that, you'll see that the counties in a lot of these areas, receive 65–70% distribution when it was all said and done. The Weld County agreement started out at that same 55–45% split, and also looked at a pro rata share model. We started out kind of with a basic tenant, and so the tenants that we discussed were that one, all the money should be spent in Weld County. The other tenant was that all the expenses thus far, we should make sure everybody gets whole from that nobody should be left holding the bag on eligible expenses. And then that kind of ends up in a place where the county thinks that it's going to spend about $13 million before the end of the year. Quite frankly, they haven't spent near that amount, so that does anticipate a second wave coming through, so they may or may not spend that amount of money. We also just broke up the municipality share based on population, and so everybody's going to receive either their initial 50% distribution or more than that if they have spent more than what their 50% pro rata share would be. I think a big variant here was that the city really anticipates that it's going to spend a lot more than its per capita share. We did have a pretty good discussion on the Weld County side that that COVID isn't necessarily hitting cities' budgets equally, that the larger population centers, just because we have more people, may experience a lot higher costs than the smaller jurisdictions. And so I think it was the agreement of the group that if we did a 50% distribution now, and then we would meet back up starting, I think in August, this is everything through August, and then we're going to meet back up in late August, early September, and kind of true up our costs, make sure what our actual burn rate is. I think the allocation goes up to 70% of the per capita at that point, and then it'll stagger up. Theoretically, if a place like Weld County isn't expending the funds that it thought it would, in other jurisdictions are spending more money than their per capita share would be, in theory, this money would kind of get moved around. So it is a little bit undefined. I think that when I talked to Mr. McCarter about what the agreement, what we agreed to as a group, he said, well, geez, this agreement doesn't counteract that, but it doesn't exactly say that. And I would say that's true. We try to keep, Weld County tried to keep the agreement fairly simple. And again, we have had really a short leash here, but that is the idea, I guess, behind this. So the total grant allotment for the town under this agreement would be a little over $1 million. Our initial installment or allotment will be $504,624. So far, we've spent as a town of what I think could be eligible expenses is about $447,000, and so this is the greater of the two. And then I would also note that when I use that number, I didn't attempt to break it down between Weld and Larimer counties yet. That's going to be a little bit too complicated of an exercise to do, and really there's no need to do that. But we do see that our initial allotment will cover, or at least more than cover, any expenses the town has incurred thus far. So, and then I would say that based on the population of the Weld County estimated population of 21,724 people, that equates to being $46.46 per person. So staff recommends the board move to approve resolution 2020-50.
Are there any questions for Mr. Hale?
Or regarding this consideration of resolution number 2020-50?
Mr. Sosowski?
Mr. Sosowski.
Yeah, thanks. I guess, Shane, can you remind me again, because I believe it's in your memo here, but what are there are only certain expenses or categories for eligible expenses that are covered by this. I'm guessing that any type of grant program that we have to help small businesses would not qualify, and they'd have to be more direct expenses, or do they?
No, and that's a great question, and I will tell you that as I read through the guidance
from the state, and we've put these questions towards DOLA, and I'll tell you, we're not getting great answers right now, and I don't think that's really DOLA's fault. I think it's because instead of having 60 days to turn this program around, they've had a pretty short amount of time from the governor to figure it out, and so they're working on some FAQs right now. So we know that any expense due to the public health emergency, anything that we didn't account for, in the expense time period from March 1st to December 30th, so I know that's pretty broad. I believe that things like our marketing grants will actually be eligible because we didn't budget to do those, and they were a direct expense that we incurred. So when I use a number like $447,000 that we've incurred, I'm including all $75,000 that the board allocated towards those marketing expenses. I'm also allocating the $50,000 that you allocated towards Upstate. I'm also including $25,000 that you allocated towards the Larimer County Fund. So we would submit all those, and quite frankly, if they're eligible, I think that would give us the opportunity to go back to the board and say, geez, instead of 500 per business, would you be okay doing, 2,500 per business? I think that as we work through what's eligible and what's not with the state, staff will be able to give the board a lot better idea of where this money could go. I can tell you in an early read from Fort Collins, they think that this money could possibly even go to rent assistance. So if that were the case, I would say, great, if that's an opportunity in the place where our business community is hurting, here's maybe a place where we can be most effective. So I know that's a long-winded answer to say I think they're eligible right now. I will tell you that we're going to set up, assuming the board adopts this, we'll set up the account tomorrow with the state in the portal. And I've already been meeting with finance to basically hub up all of what we think are eligible expenses and submit those to see what gets accepted and what gets rejected.
Okay, well, good. I mean, keep us posted. Hopefully
the totally inclusive funds are available. Let us know, obviously. Mr. McCarger, I see, of course, on the contract itself, it's got the usual approved as to form signing off by you. I guess I'd like to hear from you, and if you have any issues or concerns on the document.
I do. I think all of the local lawyers who have seen this document have concerns about its form. The time that it would take for 30 municipalities or 10 municipalities to sort all of that out would put us outside of the time windows that we've been asked to observe. I have talked with the city attorney for Greeley. His client, I believe, has approved this agreement. I know that it was scheduled for discussion sometime last week. And both he and I have concerns about the form, but we believe that the intention of the parties is clear enough, particularly when it comes to how the expenditures must satisfy the requirements of federal law. That to me is a safety valve for sorting through really how the money will flow. But Exhibit A, which is that spreadsheet that you see in these agreements, that doesn't have a lot of mechanics built into it in terms of how the money gets distributed, but the expectation is that the parties will work in good faith to achieve two basic purposes. One is to make certain that this money remains in Weld County or remains in Larimer County and isn't poured back into the state treasury, but also to make certain that the federal requirements for disbursement of the money are met.
So based on that today, you'd be willing, perhaps begrudgingly, to sign on the line that says approved as to form, and quite frankly, as to both of these contracts.
That's right, Mr. Sislowski. As much as I would have loved to have tightened this up and made it clearer and tidied it, there just isn't time for that. And so looking at the interests of my client through that lens, I think, yeah, I can sign it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Any other hands raised that I can't see? Okay.
Since I see consideration of resolution, I'm assuming yes, because it's legislative action, we're actually having to move on. So with that, is there a motion to approve resolution number 2020-50?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number 2020-50.
David Soslowski, District 6, I second.
So I have a motion on the floor from Ken Bennett, Mayor Pro Tem, and from Mr. Soslowski from District 6 to approve resolution number 2020-50 as approved. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. And it passes unanimously. Moving on to item number 3, consideration of resolution number 2020-51, a resolution approving the memorandum of understanding related to the distribution of CARES Act funds between the town of Windsor and the Laramie County Board of County Commissioners with respect to funding available for reimbursement of unbudgeted expenses related to the COVID-19 health emergency. This is legislative action. Staff presentation by Mr. Hale, our town manager. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Honor. So with the background being the same, I would just start by saying where this kind of deviates from what I just told you about Weld County. So the Larimer County agreement also started out with a proposal from the county of a 55-45% split, and also looked at a pro rata share for the county. When we discussed our basic tenets as a group, we determined that all this money should be spent in Larimer County. Another tenet is that the group didn't see that there was a lot of equity with the county getting such a large share. So we really discussed having a more equitable distribution. After a lot of discussion, we ended up at a 50-50 share. So Larimer County will receive 50% of the $30.6 million, or roughly $15.3 million. And the other $15.3 million will be split amongst the municipals with no distribution going to any kind of unincorporated county population. So like Weld County, the Larimer Group has agreed to meet monthly to true up actual costs. So again, if we look at some municipalities that are burning at a lot higher rate than others, and there's some that won't spend it, I think the tenet that all this money stays in Larimer County, that'll be the same premises in Weld County. So again, we will continue to meet to make sure that it all gets distributed. I think a good example here is like an Estes Park that has a very low per capita amount, but a very big budget and a very big population. And so, I think the anticipation is that in the end, Estes Park may spend more per capita, while Wellington may actually spend less, because they haven't really had a lot of contributions to date, at least. So the town share of this would be about $405,000 for an estimated population of 7,648, which is a per capita share at about $52.96 per person. And staff recommends that the board make a motion to approve resolution 2020-51.
Are there any questions from town board?
Mr. Sosnowski?
Mr. Sosnowski?
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Hale, actually, you're speaking on this kind of triggered it for both. When you have the 50-50 split county municipality here, for instance, but at the same time, it sounds as if the actual amount going to any particular institution is going to be based on actual verifiable expenses. And there'll be an adjustment as this goes on to while the allocation, well, I guess the question is the county's 50% subject to that same verifiable expenses related to COVID, or are they going to get the 50% period without?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the mechanics here are,
If every jurisdiction adopts this, we'll open up a state portal and we'll go in and we'll upload the agreements and we'll also upload the amount and say, so the town of Windsor share is X. And so that'll be our allocation. And so we would need to, as the county or anybody else, if we met in October and we determined we're just not going to expend that money, we haven't had the related expenses, we haven't had, we put in this great grant program and nobody applied or whatever that is. If we work with finance and determine we have $300,000 we didn't think we would appropriate, we would have to go in and say, hey, unencumber this $300,000 and Larimer County would take it back. So it would kind of take two willing parties to do that. And so same with Larimer, if they have the $15 million, that's going to be their number in the portal. So Larimer County would need to actually say, yeah, we're going to only spend $12 million. Let's unappropriate $3 million of it and put it in Fort Collins, Wellington, and Windsor, wherever they wanted to do it. So I think that conceptually, yes, that's how it should work. But again, I would tell you, Larimer County is, as far as I can tell, is giving the most generous deal of any county thus far. So I think any city doing this agreement is going to want to point to the Larimer County model. Any county going into the agreement is going to want to point to any of the others. So I think with all their healthcare, their jail, the other county expenses, I don't anticipate that they're not going to be able to get close to that number. But yeah, so I don't know if that's a long way of saying that. I think that is.
In theory, it could happen, but
Yes.
it probably will.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Mr. Bennett?
Yeah, Mr. Hale, it's my understanding that as with most federal funding, there will be some type of an audit. So it's really critical that we understand, as you've said, we have to really understand what things are going to be approved. Do we have any idea when or who or how those audits would take place?
well, we don't.
And I think this would be a federal, inspector general kind of audit, and I don't know that would happen. I assume that would happen at the state level. They would go in and inspect the state and probably pull in a few municipalities. If they found any irregularities, I think they would do a deeper dive. I think that is an important concept, though, that our relationship isn't really with, after we get this agreement, our responsibility isn't to Weld County or to the other Weld County jurisdictions. It's really that Windsor's responsibility is to the guidelines that the state and the feds have put out and making sure our costs are eligible for reimbursement. I think that's an important concept because let's just say that Johnstown does something untoward and it turns out they need to return the money. I think it is very important that Windsor isn't held liable for any of that. So we're going to follow the guidelines. We're going to check in a lot with the state. Right now, what's great is we've already expended the money that I showed there, and so it's not like we made all these spending decisions as though we're not going to get reimbursed for a penny. So by going through and submitting these costs, I think it's going to give us a good indication of what's eligible in the future. But certainly, we wouldn't want to do anything that wouldn't get reimbursed. I think our big penalty isn't necessarily an audit. Our penalty is putting a program in place, encumbering a lot of expense, turning it into the state and having the state say, no, that's not eligible for X, Y, or Z. To me, that's the bigger risk. I think if we've checked with the state, I think if we've submitted, we get reimbursed. I'm sure an audit would come through at some point. but, we get audited all the time, and we get grant monies all the time, so I'm not super concerned about that. And two, Congress is putting billions of dollars out, so I don't know that we can expect for every jurisdiction to get audited. We should plan as though we will, but I don't know that they're gonna have the resources to go through and do that. So I think we just need to make sure that any future expenses that we do, if we plan on get reimbursed, that we have good data from the state or good analysis that would indicate that we would get reimbursed.
Mr. Sosowski, did that answer your question, or was that?
It was Mr. Bennett's question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Hale or comments regarding this agenda item?
I'm seeing none.
Okay. Seeing none, is there a motion on the floor for consideration of resolution number 2020-51?
Mr. Mayor, David Zaslowski, I move that the board adopt resolution 2020-51.
This is Barry Wilson, I second that motion.
So I have a motion on the floor from Mr. Sosowski and a second from Mr. Wilson to approve resolution number 2020-51. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, nay. And it is approved unanimously. Moving on to action item number 4 this evening, ordinance number 2020-1609. An ordinance adding Article 6, Chapter 13 to the Windsor Municipal Code concerning backflow prevention and cross-connection controls. This is legislative action, and it is second reading. Staff presentation this evening by Mr. Lucas, our Director of Public Services. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Is everybody able to see my, and did I share it properly this time?
It looks great, Eric.
Great, thank you. So, Mayor and Board, before you tonight is the second reading of our backflow and cross-connection ordinance. Came to you in a work session in late May after going to the Water and Sewer Board. Excuse me. And then you had the first reading on the 8th of June. This board at that time approved it unanimously. There's been no changes to the ordinance since that time. But I wanted to share with you get this to go to the next screen. Kind of the purpose and reason why we're here tonight. Back in 2016, the state CDPHE implemented Rule 11.39, which basically required public water providers, which Windsor is one, to have cross-connection prevention in place throughout their town. We are currently not compliant. This rule became effective January 1, 2017. And the first step in becoming compliant is actually having a policy in place, which this ordinance kind of meets that qualification. So next slide kind of shares with you, what does the ordinance do? It authorizes the town to do an annual survey of our system and all the cross connections. Ultimately allows us to access private property if we need to. As we spoke before, the focus here is strictly on commercial, industrial, and multifamily, so like apartment complexes. We're not focused on single family residential, although if we come across something, we can then make that become compliant, but that's very rare and not the focus of this rule. It does require owners to remove or control cross connections with the backflow device, and I'll share with you that a little later in another slide. Collections are allowed to administer this program, but as we've discussed, we have no intentions on doing that. What we'll basically do is send letters annually to businesses, commercial and the multifamily, provide them with a list of authorized backflow prevention testing companies locally, ask them to contract with them, and then provide us with the form that states that they're in compliant with the policy. And then the record keeping will be done by the town, as well as we have staff on our town water utilities side that are certified to do the testing, so they can also go out and do some random checking to make sure that the companies that were hired are doing their job. So that kind of gets that part taken care of. So what is a backflow prevention cross-connection device? That's what one of them looks like on the right-hand side, but basically the bottom line is it allows water only flow in one direction. So if something happened and there was a break in service, it's not sucking water back through in water or some kind of contaminant back through and into our main water system. So it allows us to protect our water supply. And an example that I've shown you several times is kind of out here at the public service campus, where this example here is really an air gap. You can see there's a gap between where the water is, and it wouldn't get sucked back up into the hose if something happened. But then the picture on the left, you can see that if someone's attached a hose and stuck it down in the container, which eliminates that air gap. So in theory, if there was a pressure drop, we could, in this example, suck something back into our water supply system. But that shows on the right-hand side in our water tower out here, we have a backflow prevention device in place so that if something would happen, for example, in that picture on the left, we could prevent that cross-contamination or cross-connection from happening and pulling a contaminant into our system. So basically, that's the kind of the nuts and bolts of the ordinance that's before you. It did go to Water and Sewer Board on May 10th. We discussed this in a work session on May 18th. And then you had the first reading on June 8th, and obviously second reading is tonight. Staff is here to answer any questions you might have. I got on the call, Terry Walker and Charwin Walter are here if you have any questions that I can't answer, but we are recommending approval of this ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Is there any questions for Mr. Lucas or concerns or comments on this ordinance? This is second reading.
Mr. Soslowski?
Yes, thanks, Jess. Hey, Eric, I'm looking through the draft ordinance, and you have on your slide a comment about no fees being imposed for this at this time, and I believe the way it's structured, most of this work really will be done by the builder or whoever. Really, that'll be covered at their expense. But I was looking in here to see if, in fact, in the future, there is enough of a burden on the town that we want to impose a fee, whether we would have to do that by amending this ordinance, or does the ordinance itself simply say in there that the board can adopt a fee from time to time? And I'm not seeing it doing a quick skim. Do you kind of recall if the authority to impose a fee is already in the ordinance?
I believe that the authority to impose a fee is in the ordinance as proposed. But again, I think what I was saying tonight is staff doesn't have any intentions on getting there, but I believe your observation is correct. If we needed to in the future, we potentially could. I think if we were going to do that, it would be something that would come back to town board to say, hey, the burden of doing this has gotten too great, and we're coming back. We'd like to implement it. We wouldn't just implement it on our own without the board knowing.
Now, I figured it would be a board resolution at least that would approve it, but I was hoping it wouldn't have to be an amendment that would go through a first reading, second reading of a revised ordinance, but rather just simply taking authority that's already in the ordinance. And that's what I was asking. So,
I believe you're
okay.
correct.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions or comments for Mr. Lucas? Seeing none, I would seek a motion to approve ordinance number.
Mr. McCarter has his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Carter.
Mr. Mayor, before you go too much farther, don't forget that under the charter, you do need to inquire if anyone in the public wishes to make comment. I doubt you'll hear anyone, but we do have to go through that formality.
Thank you, Mr. McCarter. I was questioning that myself just a little bit ago. I would open it up if there are any comments from the public.
Mr. Mayor.
I do have one, Mr. Mayor.
Oh.
Julie Klein.
Ms. Klein.
As serving on the town of Monterey, we did thoroughly vent this ordinance the first go around back before you guys had reviewed it, and we think it's a very necessary evil. And so I'm in full support of putting this ordinance on our books. So thank you.
Okay.
That was all my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Klein.
Are there any other comments from the public? Since Ms. Klein at the moment is a member of the public.
I'm seeing none, sir.
Okay. Seeing none and hearing none, or any more, I should say, is there a motion to approve ordinance number 2020-1609?
Mr. Mayor, Richard Talon, District 5. I move that we adopt the ordinance number 2020-1509.
1609, is there a second?
Hi, this is Barry Wilson. I second the motion.
So I have a motion on the floor from Mr. Talon and a second from Mr. Wilson to approve ordinance number 2020-1609. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. And ordinance number 2020-1609 is approved unanimously. Resolution number 2020-52, a resolution of the Windsor Town Board appointing Miss Julie Klein to serve as the town board member representing Town of Windsor District 4 in accordance with section 3.7 of the Town of Windsor Home Rule Charter. This is legislative action. Staff presentation tonight by Ms. Humphreys, our Administrative Services Director. Ms. Humphreys, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Town Board. As a result of Mr. Brennemeyer's election to serve as mayor, a vacancy has arisen in the town board seat for District 4. After interviewing 5 qualified candidates, the consensus is to present the attached resolution appointing Julie Klein for formal adoption. Under Section 3.7 of the Home Rule Charter, the town board has the option to select the person to fill the vacancy in the next regular municipal election. Staff is recommending adoption of resolution number 2020-15, and a simple majority of those present is required.
You mean, forgive me, you said 2020-52.
52, yes, you're right.
Okay, sorry, just wanted to clarify that for the record. Are there any questions, concerns before we vote to?
Mr. Soslowski has his hand up.
Mr. Soslowski's rubbing his forehead, go ahead.
Yeah. It struck me as I looked at this, Mayor, and others.
There was a critical question that I failed to ask during the interview process that might impact my vote on this. Ms. Klein, you wouldn't by chance be a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, would you?
No, I am not.
Perfect. Okay, good. Good. Welcome aboard.
Mr. Soslowski, I would remind you that board members do have to pass background checks, so I think a Steeler fan would obviously have some kind of felonious record as well.
That would have shown up.
Ms. Klein, I think, is a Husker fan. Yes, Ms. Klein is a Husker fan.
Yes, I am a Husker fan.
She will fit in with Mr. Talon and myself, having deep roots to the Cornhusker State.
Oh, that's
there you
great.
go.
Oh, even
Barry's
Mr.
got one
Wilson.
too.
Even Mr. Wilson's on board with this. He's got connections to Nebraska as well. So, but no, I would go ahead. Oh, Mr. Bennett wants everybody to know that he is from the Ohio State University. So, just since there's a Big Ten rivalry now developing amongst the town board members, I want to say
It was an exhaustive process to interview the 4 candidates, given we had to do it via Zoom. And I don't want to put the voting ahead of this, but I know that Ms. Klein had unanimous support amongst the town board, her fellow town board members for this. So I'm assuming that we will have unanimous vote for this, but that all being said, I want to be the first to say thank you for applying and for going through this process with us. And with that, Ms. Humphreys, sorry.
Sorry, sir. There is one more comment or question for Mr. Wilson, I believe.
Mr. Wilson.
No, I just,
before. It's just my comment. Just we had a very good pool of candidates, and I want to thank Julie for applying, and all the candidates for applying, because you know, there were a lot of qualified people that were willing to step up, and we very much appreciate that. And Julie, we're glad you're here, and congratulations. In a few minutes.
Yeah, let's vote. Mr. Mayor, I move the board adopt resolution number 2020-52.
Mr. Mayor, I second that.
Having a motion on the floor from Mr. Sosowski and a second from Mayor Pro Tem Bennett, all in favor of approval of resolution number 2020-52, appointing Miss Julie Klein to the town board to fulfill the rest of my town board District 4 spot, vote aye.
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 Aye, opposed nay. And welcome to the town board, Miss Klein. You are unanimously selected and now appointed. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, no, I was going to say, and with that, I think we have to swear in and provide the oath of office to Mrs. Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Klein, if you could raise your right hand, please. Do you, Julianne Klein, swear or affirm that you will support the United States Constitution, support the state constitution, support the laws of the state of Colorado, support the charter and the ordinance of the town, and will faithfully perform the duties of the office to which you have been appointed?
I do. I swear.
Okay.
Confirm.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Oh, even
Thank
Mr.
you very
McCurr
much.
gave you an applause. The air applause. We give an air applause on Zoom.
Thank you.
So
Thank
glad
you
to have
again.
another Husker on the town board.
Moving on to item D.
Well,
Go ahead, I'm sorry, Mr. Talon.
I'm just gonna say one more sheet, so we got them in order.
I thought Mr. Talon was gonna say go Big Red. Moving on to item D, communications from town attorney, Mr. McCarter has got a problem with the Huskers.
Go green.
Any further communications, Mr. McCarter?
No, Mr. Mayor, that pretty well says how I feel right now.
Okay. Communications from staff. Let's see here. Miss Miller, you're on the line. I'm calling you out. Are you there? Any communications?
No communications, Mr. Mayor, except for to say welcome, Town Board Member Klein. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. You too, Stacey.
Communications. Nope. No, I was going to say from Mr. Gannon. Mr. Carl Gannon, any communications? This is where I see if they're really truly on the call. Mr. Lopez, any communications from you, Commander Lopez?
No new communications. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Communications from Chief Klimek.
Nothing to add, sir.
Thank you. Communications from Ms. Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a reminder to town board, I will be sending you your remote voting affirmations tonight. Please make sure you have those back to me by end of business tomorrow.
Communications from Mr. Moyer. I see you're on, and I see that we also have as a part of our package tonight the finance report from April 2020.
Yes, sir. As you noted, the report for April is in your packet. I'll be brief, but one of the things I wanted to point out that we talked with via email with board member Kozlowski today. If you look on the retail sales tax charts for the April report, you'll see that we have an increase in retail sales tax over last April, and also year to date. That at first glance, that may seem a little out of whack due to what you hear in the media and the coronavirus restrictions and whatnot. But what I want to point out on the retail sales tax is that that is recorded on our general ledger in arrears, meaning the numbers in tonight's report for sales tax, they show numbers for business that had taken place through the end of March. For March, and we also get quarterly filers filing their first quarter returns in April for the first quarter, in addition to the monthly March business. Now, the reason that's important here is for most of the first quarter, it was business as usual here prior to the corona restrictions. The restaurants were not limited to visitation by the state order, but for the last couple weeks of March. So the anticipated slowdown did not really show up until collections we received in May, when that reflects business done in April, when of course the restaurant visitation restrictions were in full swing. As far as going forward, those the restrictions have been lifted. How slowly or quickly that money comes back remains to be seen. We did see a slight decrease in May, but the combination of grocery stores and remote sales, it kept us in not as big of a decrease as we had anticipated. Now, where it does look overall, where it does look as you would expect it is in the construction use tax numbers are down. And that is what the construction use tax we collect when a building permit is issued and paid by whoever's taken out the permit. And that is different from the retail sales collections in that it's not a month behind. If somebody comes in and pays for their building permit in April, it goes in the general ledger in April, and it is reflected in this report here tonight. So there's a shorter turnaround on that than the retail sales tax. And I just wanted to point that out. Also related to the construction use tax, you can see it graphically. The graph on the top of page 4 shows our use tax, our construction use tax collections. And you can see from January, each month through April, that number goes down as we are reflecting a decrease in the number of building permits. So, excuse me, so as the year progresses, we will know more. We did make some adjustments in anticipation of this back in March. We will continue to monitor that as we get more information, both in-house and from various regulatory and media outlets. So that being said, I guess I wasn't as brief as I had hoped I would be, but short of answering any questions, I would tender my report for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Moyer. Is there any questions from town board regarding Mr. Moyer's report? Mr. Sosowski.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. And it's really just commenting for my fellow board members. Mr. Moyer and I had a bit of an exchange on emails. I was asking him in particular about the construction use tax. And obviously what we saw was a 50% decline, I think, in permits issued. And not surprisingly, then we have a 56% lower construction use tax. But there are so many other planned improvement fees, traffic impact fees, Parks and Rec improvement fees that are tied to new construction. So I'd really asked him about, is this a window for us to think about what could happen in all of those various revenue sources for the rest of the year. And I think probably the answer was perhaps, but before and the current adjustments we've made are reflective of that. And obviously we'll just need to keep an eye on it, but it's a significant decline in a number of buckets of revenue that we rely on heavily. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I'm not knowing if that was a question for Mr. Moyer. That was just a comment that you're finishing up there. So I'm not seeing Mr. Moyer look like he wants to.
No, there's no, I'd already asked and answered, I guess, but just letting the rest of the board members know that obviously this is something we got to keep our eye on.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Moyer? I will remind the board as well that in tonight's packet was also the Police Department May 2020 statistical report for your review. And with that, we will move on to item D3.
Town Manager, Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just three things. One is I do want to welcome Ms. Klein to the board. Excited to have you. Welcome. Second, I wanted to let the board know that we did have a Garden Street Stormwater Improvement Project neighborhood meeting earlier today. So I know the board saw the post, the complaints from the neighbors. Like I told you in my email, we did screw it up. I take full responsibility. I mean, we should have done a lot better job communicating to the neighbors beforehand. I think having them reach out, we put a stop to the project. We went kind of door to door, invited them to the meeting. We had the meeting today. I think it all went very well. I think that we were able to answer their questions and get to a lot better place. And also I think that it puts us in an ability as staff to really take a look at how we bring our comms team on board with all these different projects. I think that we are kind of hit and miss. Some things we do a great job in letting people know. Other things I think there's room for improvement. Sorry for the screw up, but I do think that we are in a place now to where the neighborhood seems to be a lot happier with the project, and we're going to move forward. And then finally, just a reminder, tomorrow our strategic plan, we're hoping to get started around 9:30. The agenda is kind of meet and greet, and 10 o'clock to get going. So look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow and having a good couple days of productive work. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. And just so everybody knows, he doesn't try to check out early. His laptop normally dies right about before our meeting is over. So just in case you're wondering why he's not visible on our call anymore. At least that's what he tells me, his excuses. So with that, communications from town board. Any town board members have anything they'd like to share? Seeing none, Mr. Lucas, I'm sorry. Mr. Slawski, I'm sorry, he always gets in right there at the end.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to give my...
Lucas, who seems to be waving his hands frantically, so.
Yes, I was going to go to Mr. Lucas. I'm sorry I missed his face on our round robin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Soslowski. I appreciate the fact that I wasn't snubbed because I do have 2 Steeler flags in my office. I just want to say congratulations to Julie and look forward to meeting not only you in person, but Scott and Victor tomorrow as well. And obviously spending a lot of time with the board tomorrow evening and the next day. So that's all I have. But thanks for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Steelhead.
With that, I would seek a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor from Mr. Talon to adjourn and a second from Mr. Soslowski. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Nay. And we are adjourned. Oh, cyclones. There we go. Mr. Lucas never